Hello, I am Jennifer Currie, and welcome to the Creative Soul series. I am really excited because today I am welcoming Laura Horn. And Laura is a mixed media artist, and you can see her beautiful artwork in the background. And she lives and works in Adelaide, South Australia. She's inspired by the imperfect and ever-changing beauty of nature. Laura uses pattern, texture, and color to translate her experiences into vibrant and uplifting abstract paintings. Her creative process is one of playful exploration, mindfulness, and self-discovery. And while in the trenches of motherhood, Laura began painting, and her daily post on Instagram captured the hearts of many. Within a few years, she had over 45,000 followers on Instagram. And so in 2017, she left her office job to embrace her dream of making art full time. And she's going to talk with us a little bit about that because the transition wasn't always an easy one. And it's only when she got serious about having healthy creative habits that her life and business flourished. So thank you for being here today, Laura. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's very early in the morning over here in Australia, so it's a great way to start the day.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we just get started? I would love for you to I know in your intro, we talk a little bit about how you shifted into artwork, but I'd love to hear, you speak more about your journey and your process and what what brought you into painting and doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always an artsy, kind of crafty kid. I loved painting. I loved making things. I always sort of had something on the go when I was young. And I even sort of really looked into going to art school when I finished high school. But I got quite discouraged from that path. And I honestly didn't think that I could make a living as an artist. And I had people that were kind of steering me in the direction of something more secure. So I went on to do a business degree, and pretty much at the same time as I started working in human resources and recruitment, I pretty much just packed up everything artsy, put it in a box and forgot about it for a very, very long time. And it's almost like I felt that I needed to be a grown-up and I needed to put those things away because they weren't really the sorts of things that grown-ups played with. And I didn't touch art supplies for a very, very long time. And then my sister actually, she got really involved in art journaling, and I think she was on maternity leave. She was home with young children. And I kept going around to her place, and she had all these wonderful things, journals and paints and pens. And she was just completely fascinated with it all. And it really got my attention. And it wasn't long before I started playing too. And within weeks, I was completely wrapped up in this new, exciting world of art classes, online communities. I started doing some local classes, like in-person workshops. And I just felt like I'd come alive again. I also had two young children at the time. And I felt like something was missing in my life, and this just kind of brought that piece of the puzzle back. So yeah, it was just something that came into my life and completely, I fell in love with it.
I love that. That is, it's interesting because I'm talking to a lot of artists and I'm hearing this is it's a common story. It's not common in the sense everybody has their unique story, but I'm hearing this a lot. Like I knew I was an artist. I knew I loved this, and it didn't seem practical. It wasn't, it didn't seem like the thing to do that was going to give me stability. And so I put it away. And, this is what I feel like is part of kind of rediscovering your creative soul, is that awakening when you find it again.
Absolutely. Like, I couldn't have said it better myself. I honestly felt like I'd come home, like I'd rediscovered something that was always there. And, it really did change my life. Like it made me happy and confident and excited again. And yeah, it's been a life-changing adventure that continues.
That's wonderful. And your work is so beautiful. What kind of inspired you? Like, how did that develop? What was your inspiration and your sort of, because I feel like you have a very, um, you have your own style. Your work has its
Mm.
own, essence to it. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you discovered that, because that's something that a lot of creative souls are sort of looking for. How do we find that unique
Uh,
voice?
Yeah, look, to be honest, it wasn't an easy process. I did a lot of classes. I was inspired by a lot of other artists, and I really struggled for quite a long time to find what I loved, in all of that, and to make it my own. It was something that was challenging for me. But I guess the thing that really helped me was when I started committing to almost a daily practice of making and creating. And it really was through, putting in the time each day, and also taking the time to reflect on my work, spending time really looking at what I loved about what I was doing, what were the elements, and also when I looked at other people's art too, like just really thinking about what it was that I was drawn to. And I guess one of the sort of common themes for me was anything that had sort of a natural kind of influence. And also I really love pattern. Like, I really love different kinds of layers of marks and patterns. So I just became clearer about what it was that I really liked. I also came to understand my color palettes. I realized that I was sort of drawn to bright colors, but with this sort of earthiness as well. So using some neutrals in there. And over time, I began to see common threads in my work, and I just developed those. Working in series as well, I found really helpful too. So I started, rather than doing all sorts of different things all the time, I started sort of having pieces of work that I would come back to and do more in the same style. And through that, over time, it became a little bit more cohesive, and I felt more like I was, creating work that came from my own, I guess, my own heart.
Wow. Yeah. And it's so beautiful. I love your paintings so much. They're so gorgeous. Um, one of the things that you mentioned in your bio, when we were talking about your introduction, you were saying that, so for a while you were kind of doing this, like you weren't doing it at all. Then you rediscovered it. So you
Mm.
were a mother and you were now an artist. Tell us a little bit about that shift that you made, where you were really committing to your creativity more and more, because you had a lot of other things going on in your life too. And I think, yeah, if you could speak about that, because I think this is also common for creatives to figure out, like, how do I
Yeah.
fit this into my life? How do I make
Yeah,
time for it?
absolutely. Like, I actually became pretty obsessed with painting, like to the point where I was doing it all the time, and actually kind of neglecting other aspects of my life, such as, my health and well-being, and even, dare I say it, my kids. It was, I really just went all in. I was excited and it was good, but I also could feel that it wasn't sustainable. I was juggling a part-time job, working in an office, two young kids, and then really just squeezing as much art as I could in all the spaces in between. And so it got pretty hectic, and I was working in the evenings, on the weekends. It was pretty all encompassing for a while. And eventually I started to realize that I needed to make some changes, because although I was doing what I love, I wasn't feeling the way I wanted to feel. And I was starting to already feel exhausted, even though I was only just getting started. And it was just a bit of a flag for me, that I really needed to start making some changes and some decisions about where this was heading for me.
Okay. So I'm just going to repeat what I heard, because I think that we had a little like there was like a little thing where I couldn't hear you for just a second, but did you say that you felt like you got kind of
Oh, okay.
exhausted? Like you were kind of, even though you were doing what you loved, there was a
Yeah,
part of you that was exhausted. Is that what the word you said? Because it kind of got pixelated or something. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
yeah, no, that's right. It was
Okay.
basically that even though I was doing what I loved, I wasn't feeling the way that I wanted to feel. I was already starting to feel exhausted. I was, yeah, it wasn't the ideal life that I was looking for.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you're saying that, because I was just another person that I interviewed for the series who's Clara Wisner. I was just speaking to her actually, and we were talking about this balance and how it really is important to the creative, to everyone. We all need balance,
Mm,
but that there is this kind of, it can be very enticing when you kind of rediscover this love of, your soul's love, and
mm.
you're so excited that we can actually kind of get a little out of balance, and that it's been idealized a little bit, even that you're, this
Yeah,
kind of, the crazed artist, and they're like little Garrett not eating or sleeping and like painting all night and that kind of thing. There's some very
yeah.
romantic idea of that, but
Hmm.
I could you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like this has been romanticized, and it's kind of part of like the suffering of a creative life, but I don't necessarily feel like it's necessary for us to have that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the decisions that I made that has really helped me to get into the place that I wanted to be, which is having what I would, a healthy creative practice. And it's not perfect. There are days where I slip back into my old ways, for sure. But I'm very conscious now, and I'm very aware, which has been the change for me. I now feel like I'm on a conscious path with it,
Mhm.
rather than it all just happening without me in taking steps to steer it in the direction that I want it to be. So talking about what sort of happened to me when I was on that path. I was, there were a lot of challenges. Sometimes there is that romanticized notion of being an artist, sort of gently flowing through your days painting, and it wasn't like that. It was there was some years there that were pretty tough going, and there were a lot of sacrifices really for me and my family, because I was on this path, and let me try and explain a little bit better. So um, basically my two kids, they were in two separate bedrooms. They were happy, and I needed space. So one of these sacrifices was that I have a boy and a girl, that they ended up having to move in and share a bedroom, which they were not happy about, just so that I could have some space
Mhm.
to get this business off the ground. So, and then I took over their bedroom. I'd already taken over the dining room. We ended up converting our garage into a studio, but the studio was leaking. So whenever it rained, which was usually in the middle of the night, my husband and I would jump out of bed, go grab towels and buckets,
Oh my
and
goodness.
try and rescue whatever was in the studio, because it was leaking, and all the time, and I was working a lot in the evenings, because I still had a part-time job. I was working on the weekends. I was doing things like art markets, and my kids would say to me, it's not much fun having a mum as an artist, and all her friends. This is my daughter.
Mhm.
They all had that romanticized view of what it was like. Oh, it must be so great. Your mum's an artist. You get to, do art and craft all the time. And she'd just roll her eyes and go, "You have absolutely no idea." And so there was I think people talk about the grind, like before sort of things start to flow. There are a
Mhm.
few years for me that I would say was more of a grind than a flowing state. And but fortunately, I was able to recognize where things were going, and that I wasn't living the life that I wanted. And being a creative, I think one of the things that is important to remember is that we get to create the life
Mhm.
that we want to live too.
Oh,
And,
yes.
you know,
I love
and
that. I love the way you said that. Yeah.
I realized I was being creative, making all these paintings and doing all this art journaling, but I wasn't putting the same energy into creating the lifestyle, the creative life that I wanted to be living. And that was kind of when the penny dropped for me.
Okay. And so what did you do? Like when that happened, what are some of the things that you did to start transitioning and like, creating that life? Because I do feel, I love the way you said that, because I do feel like, I feel like it could be this way for anyone, but I think particularly for creatives and for artists, it's like it's not like a job that you go to and then you just leave that job and your creative wheels are sort of turning all the time. It is your life. It's like a calling. It's
Mm,
something that you're doing. You're being it. It's not like a thing you just go do. Does that make sense?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thinking of that, you know, I think we do have to make commitment. So I love that part of your
Mm.
story, that there was a part of you that you really had to just ground that in and decide that you were going to really dedicate yourself to
Yeah.
something that you loved.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then the next phase, it seems like, was realizing, okay, but I got to pull that into balance. Like this.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what happened. And I do agree that, you know, that falling in love stage and going at it and really, getting stuck in was an important part of my journey
Mhm.
too. you know it wasn't perfect. There was, ups and downs with it, but it was an important part of me committing to this creative life that I really wanted.
Mhm.
And also, when we talked about earlier about, developing my style as well, that was an important part too, because I was showing up pretty much every day, and that helped me to understand what I wanted to create. So, but yeah, there's transitions and different phases, and I knew that I needed to move into a more balanced phase of my creative life. And I'm trying to think how it first started, because it's been quite a gradual process. There was that sort of moment when I realized I needed to make a change, but then the changes have been over a period of time. And I think the very first thing I started doing was actually spending more time in nature, which connected with my art, which had become more nature inspired. And I started with the simplest things of just making sure that I got out and walked my dog a few times a week, and had a bit of time to sort of pause and relax and unwind. So it started with that very simple step of, yeah, let's start looking after ourselves a little bit better, and get out for a little bit of exercise and fresh air. So that was the first sort of stage of, I guess, this next part of my life. And then I really started thinking about how I wanted to sort of manage the transitions in my day. So how I started my day, how I kind of finished my day. I became interested in those kind of almost like rituals of a day. And I developed more of a morning practice and an evening practice, and actually an afternoon practice, to help guide me through my days. So I began to realize that I didn't need to spend all my time painting, that I could actually
Mhm.
spend time setting up my day, closing out my day. I cut back on my actual painting hours as part of this commitment to spending as much energy on cultivating the creative practice as such, like the process. So I actually gave myself permission, which is something I sort of needed to do, because I had a bit of a history of feeling that I needed to use every spare hour to paint, which came from that period of my life where I was painting while holding down a job and looking after kids. So I had to kind of change my approach, because I had transitioned at this point into being a full-time artist. And so I did have a little bit more freedom. And so I gave myself permission that I could give myself perhaps an hour in the morning to kind of set myself up for the day. And I did some of the things that I like to do is I like to do some journaling in the morning. I have a journal where I kind of think about my intentions for the day. That's incorporated into a gratitude practice as well. So I also love just reading. I love just writing, like morning pages and things like that. I love essential oils, so I'll often burn some essential oils, and I'll have a cup of tea. I often sit outside because I live in an area that's pretty nice most of the year. So I try and do as much of this as I can outside. And yeah, I really, just give myself that hour to actually sort of set myself up for the day. And that includes thinking about, what I want to spend my day doing and what are some of the things that would make me feel good if I did that day. So there is a productive element to it as well, where I sort of set up my intentions as far as what work I'm going to approach. And I try and keep that fairly simple. So rather than having a to-do list of, 10 things, I'm really looking at, usually about 3 things that it would be good if I did those things. I'd feel good at the end of the day if I'd done those things.
Mm-hmm.
So a morning practice has been really helpful for me. The other thing that I recognized in me was that I would often paint right up until pickup time. So many people that have kids will know about this, picking up kids at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I would be, I'd have paint on my face. I would, my paints will all be all over the place. And I'd look at the time, 3 o'clock, and I'd be rushing out the door to go get my kids, but my head would still be in my painting. I'd be frazzled. I'd pick up the kids, and then I'd want to come back and I'd want to, put the lids on my paints or even keep going painting sometimes, which I used to get into trouble for. So I'd come back into my studio to clean up, and of course I wouldn't clean up. I would start painting again because I'd see something, and then the kids would be hungry and they'd be like, Mom, we need food, we need this, and you're painting, So I realized I needed to make some changes there. So now I really consciously close out of my painting session, and I give myself about half an hour before pickup, so I'm much more aware that that's going to be healthier for me and for my children. Mm-hmm. So, about half an hour before, I actually consciously, cleaning up my brushes, bringing everything inside. Sometimes I even have time to have a cup of tea, and I'm making myself ready for the next stage of my day, which is more about my kids and getting dinner ready and helping them with homework. But I'm bringing myself into that state so that I can be present with them, mm-hmm. and that I can then enjoy that part of the day and make that a special part of the day. So that's another change that I've made. And I will say here, it is still a work in progress, and I slip up sometimes. So I do want to say that because, my kids still get cross at me for times when I haven't taken that approach, but I'm much more aware, and I'm doing much better with it than I was. And so then, that sort of closes out my sort of studio time. Then I have my time with my kids and my family time. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes in the evenings, I'll check back in and maybe, I might do a few emails or things once the kids are happy. But, I've become much more, conscious of creative routines and habits that are helpful to me. So I used to kind of resist routine. I do you know what I mean? I really felt like, okay, I've left my job in an office where there are a lot of rules and routines. I have all this freedom, and therefore I've kind of resisted putting in place some routines in my business. But it's only later that I realized that having some structure would actually really help me and enable me to have freedom in my studio practice, because I'm not thinking about how I'm doing things. I know how I'm moving through my day, and that I could still have that routine loose enough that I can make changes, that if I wake up and I want to do something completely different, and that's fine too. Like, I realized I could build that flexibility in, but that having some structure to my days would really be helpful. And so I started to kind of think about what some of those weekly rhythms could be for me. And, I've started, having a couple of days that are more focused around studio time. And I have some days that are more around the business side of things. I break up my day into blocks. So generally, if I am having a studio day, I'll have like a morning block and then an afternoon block. I've really started to bring in some structure into how I move through the day, and I feel a lot better for it. So, yeah.
Well, I think this is such a valuable conversation and a valuable topic, because this is another one of those things I feel like it kind of goes against these sort of romanticized, idealized perceptions of, what an artist is, or what, that creative souls were just, like you said, floating through our days. And, we get to be kind of loosey goosey, and we don't have, and that is, kind of that people experience creative people to be that way sometimes. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it's not always a supportive way of showing up in your creativity.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. I love that you're sharing this, because, you're an example of somebody who is creating a grounded creative business. And it's not just about like springing out of bed and just floating through your day and only doing the things you like and only doing the stuff that's fun. And, you creative people, we get to have a lot of fun, and we get to do a lot of these other things that we need to do to ground our lives, because it's part of it. And I think you're talking about foundation stuff. That's what it feels like to me. Like, that's how I would think of it. It's just like laying good foundation to build off of. Because it's really easy. Just when you were saying you resisted the structure and resisted the scheduling, like that was a big one for me. Like, I just wanted to have like big open spaces on my calendar. But it's not always conducive to actual productivity. Like, sometimes we just will fritter away all these big spaces on our calendar because we don't have anchor points, like you're saying, like blocks of time where we know that we need to finish it. I think there's a lot of value in that. So
and that's definitely been my experience. My business has grown, and I think my well-being has improved through putting in place some of these things, and also putting in place, I guess, boundaries around things that protect us, and
that's a good word. A healthy boundary to really support your creative work.
And I do like that word, boundaries. I've heard that quite a lot recently, but it's something that I've kind of attached a lot of importance to in my day-to-day life, is recognizing those boundaries that help me. And some of the boundaries that I have, like, I used to often paint for very long periods of time because I was jamming it all into a couple of days a week. So sometimes I would paint for 10 hours on my feet, and I'd be sore. Like, I'd be, back pain, neck pain. Like, I was experiencing quite a lot of physical symptoms that was coming from painting. And so now, one of my boundaries is around the amount of time that I spend painting, because I'm protecting my back and my neck and my shoulders, as well as, making sure that I'm giving time to other things. And I have, obviously, I talked about the boundary I have around the time that I spend painting in the afternoon. I now think of that time as being family time with my kids rather than painting time. So I have a boundary there. Boundaries around social media. I did have like I did spend a lot of time on social media in the early part of my painting journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how I grew. And I got a huge amount of opportunities through Instagram. And but now I've really needed to change my approach there. And I've put boundaries around that to ensure that I have time for other things, because I got one of those, tracker things on my phone to track just how much time I was spending on my phone and get an insight. And I was quite gobsmacked when I discovered how much time I was spending on things like Instagram and on my phone. And I was like, wow, I could be spending this time on other things. I keep saying I don't have enough time to exercise, and I don't have, if I'm spending 3 hours on my phone, I've got time to exercise. So I really had to think about that, because, Instagram is part of my business. Social media is part of my business, and it is important. And, I love the opportunity to connect with people and share my work. And I want to still have that, but I want to have it in as healthy way as I possibly can. So now I actually used to post pretty much every day. I don't so much anymore. I sometimes will post just a few times a week. I'll often kind of post and walk away and just sort of let it be, rather than sort of hanging around checking constantly. So that's another boundary that's been important to me. And so those kind of things really are a helpful part of feeling healthy healthy about what I'm doing. And also considering what I take on. As when I started, I'd just say yes to everything, absolutely everything that came my way I said yes to, which was part of that early stage when we're talking about transitions, right? So you've got that early stage, you love it and you say yes to everything, and then you realize that you are exhausted and you need to get some balance back, and you probably need to learn how to say no. And that was one of my learnings as well, was really thinking about the things that I do and whether they feel good for me, and being confident enough to recognize that something maybe isn't right for me and be able to say no to it, which is that old thing of when you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. So you're giving yourself space. So that was another kind of learning for me too.
Yeah. It sounds like it's been a journey of kind of finding where that balance is, like that, and it's unique for everybody. So I do think it's a journey, because it's not like, it's not like these things, exactly the things that you did are the perfect solution for every other artist out there, but but there might be things that and if it's resonating for you as you're listening, I would say pay attention to that, because there probably is a message in that for you that, that would be really helpful for you. That would be grounding for you. That would be helping you find balance. I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit, because you mentioned it earlier about, when your kids gave up their bedroom, or, like you were kind of talking about, like, in that sense, it was sort of like physical space had to be sacrificed so you could have space for your studio. But, I also feel like you've touched on it with just talking about like structuring your day and that kind of thing. But could you talk a little bit about the need for letting some things go in order to make room for that creative part of yourself? I mean, I think that maybe even in the sense of leaving your job and going into it full time, there was transition, but how did you experience that? Or how was that? How could you just talk about that a little bit more? I think this is an important topic.
So letting some things go in order to make space for the creative, for my creative life. So there were things that I needed to do in order to, I guess, create the creative life that I wanted. And so I'm just trying to think, what are some of the things that I needed to kind of do? I guess leaving my job, my office job, was a big one. And that was that was a decision that took a couple of years. I was sort of thinking about it, and I didn't do it straight away. It was a gradual process. So what happened was, initially when I started painting, I was working 4 days a week in my office job. So I didn't have much time. The day that I was painting was also the day that I was probably meant to be cleaning the house. So, and then not long after I sort of discovered it all, I knew this was important to me. I just had that feeling. And I went in and I went into my boss at the time, and I just said, I don't really know why, but I need to cut my hours back. There's something that I need to explore here. I don't even really know what it is. And they knew about my painting and whatnot, but I just said, there's something here. I need to just take a little step back. So I was working in a not-for-profit, working as a program officer, administration kind of role. And so I cut back to 2 days a week. Now that was quite a big decision, because at the time I was actually a manager at the time, and I couldn't really be a manager on working 2 days a week. So it was a decision to actually step down basically from a good job, a secure job, and take less responsibilities at work in order to give myself this space to just find out what this creative calling was for me. And so that was one of the decisions I made. And then, so I worked for quite a long time, 2 days a week. And I then spent about 2 days a week on my painting. And by this stage, I was getting quite busy. I'd had exhibitions. I was just selling my work through various places. Things were happening for me. And I had quite a lot of clients, and it got to a point where I was as busy in my art as I was in my job. It was, I had enough to know that I could make myself an income when I left my job. And before I left, I even tested it out a little bit, because I went on long service leave. Mm-hmm. So I had been in this office job for quite a long time, and I had long service leave. So I took 3 months off from my job completely to test the waters with being a full-time artist. And after I did that, I just felt I couldn't go back. By that stage, I was on the path. And while I wasn't, making a good income yet, I could see the potential that I could contribute through my art, and that was enough for me to then make the next step, which was to leave and see what I could do. And it was scary, and I was worried about being able to support my family and contribute. And I just had to remind myself that if it didn't work out, I could still get another job, mm-hmm. That this, although it was a big decision, it didn't mean that, I couldn't, later on pick up other work and get back on the path that I was on if I wanted to. So it made it feel less scary for me when I told myself that. But doing that just gave me the space to really give this, a real go. And so that was one of the big decisions for me, was to make that transition to being a full-time artist. And when I say full-time, I'm not really full-time, because I only really work half of the time. The rest of the time I'm a stay-at-home mum, essentially. So, mm-hmm. But basically that's my main source of income now, and that's how I spend my days. So, I had to let go of that. I also, I guess, what else did I need to let go of? I guess I had to let go of, some of my self-doubt and comparison to other artists, and I needed to own my own space and be confident in where I was at in my journey, and to know that, that I'm just really getting started, and I'm still got a lot to learn, and that, I might look at other people that have, been on this path for a lot longer than me, and they've got all sorts of things. They've got, they've written books and they've done various exhibitions and won prizes, and they have workshops and classes and things like that. And I just needed to recognize that was their journey, and that I'm on my own path. So there was, just becoming more confident has been really important to me. And my husband's actually really noticed it, like just generally as in me as a person. Because I'm quite a shy person. I wouldn't say I'm a super confident person. So, but rediscovering creativity really helped me to feel better about myself, and my confidence has really grown. So, just in talking to people, sharing what I do. Like, I was always one of those people that really struggled with that kind of thing. And this kind of really helped my voice. And when I say voice, and I'm talking about my actual voice, rather than my creative voice, but it actually helped my voice to come out. Like I felt, I guess, more worthy in a way. Like I had something to be here for. So, that has been, I let go a lot of anxiety and I guess, yes, self-esteem and confidence challenges that I'd had in the past. I started to let go of some of that. So that's been super powerful for me.
That's huge. And that actually, like, that kind of makes me, I feel a little emotional hearing you speak about that, because I think that's really what happens when we say yes to our soul, when we say yes to that soul calling, to the thing that really is like, whatever that may not be painting for everybody, but, in your case, that's what it was. And I also feel like stepping into business, like that's it's kind of like a stage of the creative empowerment, because it does stretch you. It takes you, it kind of increases your bandwidth in a way. Like you do end up, because in order to be in business, you are going to be sharing what you do with the world. Like that's part of the whole, that's how that works. Like we have to share. And so there's a whole spiritual journey there with it's not just, it's business, but there's so much more there in that journey.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for me, it has been because all the little steps that I've taken have all pushed out my comfort zone and built my confidence and built my resilience, because not everything has gone to plan, but just the little things, putting your work out there, hanging it on a wall for other people to look at, speaking to people about your work. And it's been like small little steps, to building, becoming more empowered, as you say. I think that's a good way of describing it, feeling, more confident and empowered, and it's been a personal journey for me, definitely.
Well, I'm so happy that you spoke about this, because, I've talked with other people about, the healing of the act, like, because there's a healing that happens when we're actually creating our work, that whole kind of honeymoon, and there's like, and that is something that is a part of it. And then there's also more when you get to this part where you're stepping into, maybe I want to do the next stage to go into business. I want to be more empowered. And there's a whole other kind of like stretch and growth that happens there. And it's a really beautiful thing. I'm actually noticing the time. So I wanted to,
I was going to say, I just looked up at the clock as well.
It's like later than I thought. So I just want to give you a minute to tell everybody. I know you have a free gift for everybody, and there's the links will be on the page where you're watching this interview right now. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what I did was I decided to have a think about what it is that I have done to help me have a more sustainable and healthy creative practice, and what are some of the things that I've put in place. And I've put together just a little PDF that includes 10 ideas that people could maybe consider whether they might be helpful for them. just around some of the things that we've talked about in this discussion today, around things like boundaries, morning practices, spending time in nature, those sorts of things. So I've I have that as a free gift for everyone.
Wonderful. So you can click on the link and get that. And Laura, this has been so lovely. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. And I think I'm very inspired, and I love what you do. I love what you're sharing with the world. So thank you so much for
Oh,
being
thank
here
you.
today. Yeah.
Thank you so much as well. It's another step for me is actually doing interviews like this. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have a conversation and feel so, it's been such a nice, warm and, comfortable conversation. And I've really enjoyed, thinking through all the things that the journey that I've been on, and hearing about your journey too.
Yeah, wonderful, sweetheart. Well, thank you so much. And I want to say goodbye to everybody, and you'll see me again soon. And thank you so much for being here, honey. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.